Today we are making lemonade wine.
Also known as Skeeter Pee. By the way, in case you're wondering why it's taken us so long to make this recipe, first it's because, why is it called Skeeter Pee? I mean, it's yellow. It's anybody's pea, isn't it? Like, does it have to be Skeeters in general? But then there's also everybody has made it. There's a million different ways, a million different recipes out there, and they're all basically the same thing. So we were like, do we really even want to do this? I mean, everybody's done it. What can we really bring to the party? What can we do that's different?
But then one day we were at Costco in a galaxy far away, and upon
Clearwater.
yonder shelf we saw
This
ta-da!
organic lemonade. And we thought, you know what? Everybody uses that real lemon stuff in a plastic bottle, right? And then they add sugar to it. Guess what they're making? Lemonade. And then they add water to it, too. That makes lemonade. So what if we just started out with, lemonade? So what we need to do first is figure out what is the specific gravity of our lemonade. So that's going to require taking a reading. We have a lot of stuff here today. Stuff's everywhere.
So all of our fermentation utensils have been sanitized in the red bucket of sanitization!
Thought she was going to try to set me up to do it again. I was like, nope, not falling for it. Oh, can we? No. I'm afraid I wouldn't get it back out. I was going to try to do it in the bottle, but that never works out very well. Now, when we say take a reading, what we're doing is we're getting a specific gravity reading to find out the density of sugars. Actually, it's the density in general of the liquid. But we want to know approximately the amount of sugars are in it so that we can figure out a gravity so that we know how much sugar, if any, we need to add to the must to make a proper lemonade wine. Now, I had already looked at the label and I saw it's roughly about a pound of sugar per gallon, which puts it to like a 1.045 to 1.050. And it turns out it is exactly, 1.054. So it's a little bit more. This is 96 ounces. So 1.054 original gravity. So you know what that means? I'm going to add a pound of sugar. We are going to be making a 1 gallon batch of this. So I'm going to use a 1 gallon fermenter and I'm going to put it on my scale, but I'm also going to pour this sample in here. Some people waste this. In this case, it's totally fine to drink it, but we are not some people. So I'm pouring it in here. There's no harm in doing this. Everything is sanitized. We did actually sanitize the graduated cylinder. As I was starting to say, what I want to do though is now that we know this is 1.054, I'm going to add 1 pound of sugar to this in a 1 gallon fermenter. What that means is I'm going to be getting 0.046 more points of gravity from sugar. So 46 and 54 gives us 1.100. Works out beautifully well. That is a really, really nice starting gravity. It's kind of our target in most cases. And why? It's because it ferments nice and easily using the methods that we recommend.
Whenever you add dry ingredients to your brew, it is a good idea to use a dry funnel. If your funnel is moist due to sanitization practices or whatnot, then your dry ingredients will stick to said moist funnel.
We know this from experience. So in goes 1 pound, 454 grams, 16 ounces, however you like to represent it.
Now we used white sugar because we want to have a neutral flavor profile for our sweetener.
That should be the last time we need a scale for this recipe, by the way. A few things that we want to add. Now, I know that lemon juice is very acidic, but it's not very tannic. So this would make a very watery wine. What I mean by that is it would taste thin, like watery. It wouldn't have a full mouthfeel, it wouldn't be viscous. So I prepared ahead of time 1 cup of generic black tea. I'm saying generic because the name brand doesn't matter as long as it's black tea. Could you use other kinds of tea if you really wanted to? Yes, but it won't do the same thing. What we're after is the tannins. Will this taste like tea? No. And even if it did, it's called an Arnold Palmer. What's wrong with that?
But we're not putting enough tea in to create a tea flavor to our brew. We're just putting it in for the tannins.
Also, one very important fact. It doesn't really matter how much water I use here, but I did use as little as possible because I don't want to dilute this any more than I have to. That's why I used very little. I used 1 tea bag. That's the critical thing. If I had used 2 tea bags, same amount of water, I'm putting in double the tannins. If I had used twice as much water and only 1 tea bag, I'm still putting in the same amount of tannins. That's an important concept to understand. It's about extraction from the tea leaves, not the amount of water. So I'm going to just pour this right in right now. By the way, that was steeped for 5 minutes, then the tea bag was removed. It's still really warm, so what I want to do is just add in a little bit of our lemonade. And then
You can set that in the... There, that's me.
I'm going to use a solid stopper. You can use the cap that came with your jug if it has one, or any other way you want of covering it up. If you don't have any of these, the one with the hole is fine. Just stick your thumb over it. That's why I call this my thumb saver bung, because you know your thumb gets that little hole like after a while, and it doesn't really hurt or anything. It's just a funny thing I like to say. And I'm just going to mix this up. This is known as shaking the bejesus out of it. It's also putting air into the mix, okay? So there's two reasons for it.
Now, why is air important at this stage of the process?
I'm so glad you asked that question. The reason why air is important at this stage is because yeast in the early stages of its life cycle of fermentation has to build a colony. And to do that, basically they kind of have to get down and party, but they need oxygen for that to happen. It's a common misconception that you do not want oxygen in your fermentation at all, when in fact, for the first part, you do. But after alcohol starts to be present, you don't, because the other thing that is already present in here that you don't want to make grow is acetobacter. That's what makes vinegar. That needs oxygen in order to grow, as well as alcohol. So basically, sum up, before there's alcohol, add oxygen. Once there's alcohol, stop adding oxygen. That way you won't get vinegar. Okay, now that we have that mixed up pretty good, there's a couple things that I want to add. One of them is yeast nutrient. Now, we often say that it's not necessary to add yeast nutrient, which isn't entirely accurate. I mean, does it help? Yeah, of course it does. And usually I say 2 grams of Fermento, which is my yeast nutrient of choice, in a little bit of water. For this though, it's so acidic that I decided to go with 3 grams, just to be on the safe side. But before I put that in, we have here some Rangpur lime zest. If you don't have this, this is a totally optional ingredient, something that we're doing just to make it a little bit more City Steading like. And, you know, it kind of just goes with our history because we've got history with Rangpur lime leaves. For those of you that have been around a while, you know what I'm talking about. But the zest and the limes themselves are actually wonderful. It's kind of like a combination of a mandarin orange and, well, it's mandarin orange and citron is the hybrid, but I don't know what a citron is like. So it's kind of like an orange...
Lemon.
Yeah, an orange lemon. It really is. And I'm putting in a couple, 2-3 pinches, you know, not too much, not too little, probably about a tablespoon if asked. If you actually have whole, like fresh limes, just do like half of a lime peel. You can use limes, you can use lemons, you can use oranges, you can use mandarins, whatever you like. It's going to add a nice little extra to this that I think will enhance it slightly, because lemonade is nice. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's great. But I think I want to make it a little bit more, you know, make it a little extra, if you get what I'm saying. That's not going in, so I'm going to have to pour some. There we go. Now it's all in there.
Do you want to put that in there?
Yes, I am also going to pour in our yeast nutrient. Give it one last stir up first. Make sure there's nothing stuck to the bottom. And in that goes. And wash out the funnel, you know.
Waste not, won't not.
There we go. Okay, and the last ingredient, the most contentious of all ingredients, is raisins. I'm just kidding, there's gonna be no raisins in this recipe. Okay, so I wanna put in more of the lemonade. This is a 96-ounce container, and I was debating as to whether we were gonna need another one. I don't think we do. I think we're good. That pretty much does it. We bought 3 of these. Wondering what we're gonna do with the other 2 now.
If you have suggestions,
yeah, feel free. Let us know.
In the comments below.
Because we're not just going to drink it. I don't drink things like that. It's too sugary. Okay. Now.
Shake, 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 Sonora.
One thing is missing. Derica, why are we using this particular yeast?
Well, we're using this particular yeast because I looked it up on the internet. It has a 13% alcohol tolerance, which was our basic range that we were going for.
Pretty much coincides with our original gravity.
It also provides a nice fruity ester component, and we wanted to accentuate the fruitiness of the lemon.
And the Rangpur lime.
But before we add this, I really must insist that Brian shake this up and take another gravity reading.
Why? I can put the yeast in first. Oh, I know why. But I could shake it after I put the yeast in too.
Yes, and then it's going to coat on the front and you're going to...
Okay, she's right. The reason she said that is because I added more water. and I didn't mix it afterwards. But you know
Well,
what?
we add the water and the sugar, and we don't know for sure if our math was right, even though it probably was because it's Brian.
It's actually probably a little bit lower because I did put some water in there between the tea and the fermented. Oh,
Right.
But now I actually need the stuff to take a reading with. So I just want to say, it smells very much like lemonade.
Surprise! All right, so I re-sanitized all this stuff because that's what I do. If we're not using it, I normally just place it back into turbos.
Okay, in case you're wondering, the reason we take a reading now is A, to verify what I did before, make sure my math is okay, see if we need more sugar, we need any other adjustments, and B, to have an original gravity reading. The original gravity is good to have, not absolutely critical, but it does tell you if you're in the right range. The final gravity is really the important one, but that comes later on in the video. And we are sitting at 1.094 for original gravity, which is pretty much exactly right given that we had to dilute that just ever so slightly, and we're probably just slightly shy of an actual full gallon. It's not really a problem to be lower in the fermenter in primary. It's totally okay. If this starts to rise up and make a lot of foam, you'll be pretty happy that you don't have it over full, or as I like to say, being greedy. So, because it'll erupt and come out and could make a mess. And we've had stories of people's airlocks blowing up and it's spurting out onto the ceiling. Yes, the ceiling. I'm not even kidding. So yeah, it's probably best to leave a little bit of headspace when you're making a primary fermentation.
So I'm still going to hold back on adding the yeast because I want Brian to start taking notes at this point.
You see how she is? So bossy. So what goes in my notes? Well, first, I wrote Skeeter Pee, just because that's what everybody knows this as, so that's what we're calling it.
Today's date.
Today's date. Well, my watch is wrong. It says June 31st, which doesn't exist. So today is July 1st, as far as I can tell. July 1st, 2022, by the way. And we are using 96 ounces of Costco, yeah, there's a C in there. Lemonade. We used 1 pound white sugar. We used a tablespoon of Rangpur lime zest. We used 1 tea bag of tea. Black tea. We used 3 grams Fermentation. And we're using, what is it? Premier Côte de Blanc?
Premier Côte de Blanc.
All right, as you guys know, Red Star, as much as they make great yeast, they make horrible packets because you have to cut them. They should be terrible packets. That's right, they should be terrible packets. Anyway, a whole packet of yeast generally makes up to 5 gallons. Now, the key there is up to 5 gallons. In here is live yeast as well as a lot of dead yeast. And I don't mean inactive, I mean dead. They serve as sort of a starter food for the other yeasts.
They're dead, Jim.
Yeah. Yeasts are cannibals. So depending on how much you put in is the percentage of live to dead that you have. Is it possible to just take a few grains and throw them in and hope for the best and make it work? Yeah, it could probably work pretty often. It'll take a lot longer to get going because you have less organic material to get started with. So they have to multiply that much more, which they're probably not upset by that. But they do have to work a lot harder to build up that colony. So I like to use a whole packet, especially in something like this that is a little more acidic, going to be a little bit harder for the yeast to work on. So I'm going to use a whole packet.
So for those of you who are new to brewing and don't understand why we keep stressing the acidity level of this particular brew.
Also, thwack your packet. Sorry.
It's because fermentation has a pH balance range that it prefers to have less stress on the yeast.
You generally want it to be around like 3 to 4.5, depending on the yeast, for most things. And like a mead, for example, honey tends to fall into that range all on its own. So when mixed with water, so that automatically is pretty much there. That's why you don't see us do a lot of pH readings. Whereas this, I'm pretty sure this is a little bit more acidic than that, and we didn't dilute it in any way. We didn't, there's really not much water added, so this has probably got a pretty good acidity level. It may be just on the edge of the acceptable range for it, so I don't think it's a problem, but in the research that I've done on Skeeter Pee, some people said that they did have some issues with it getting started, so I just wanted to be safe. But what I need now is an airlock and a bung. Okay, this is an airlock and this is a stopper or a bung. The reason why we use these is because they keep bugs, literally bugs, out, but they also allow your brew to off gas. In a couple of videos, we have said you could use the screw cap method and leave it a little loose. It's not really recommended. That was like if you've got nothing, no way to get an airlock, and you really just don't want to make the investment right away, even though they're like $3. That's the only reason why I would say to use the screw cap method. I really don't like it. I don't like to use it that way. So this is really the way we should go. And I bring that up only because a couple people lately have asked that question and assumed that we were saying it's perfectly okay to do that. No, that's kind of like last resort kind of thing. Use an airlock. Trust me, you're far better off. What this does, though, is the gases can escape. They go up this side, down, they push the liquid down, and then it starts to bubble out. And, you know, it's just more interesting to watch, too. I mean, the cap just doesn't do anything, right? But it works sort of like a trap in a sink. Not exactly the same, but it prevents gases, the sink prevents gases from going this way, this lets gases go this way. But bugs, when they get in here, die, okay? You might see a couple of fruit flies or small flies in your liquid, what kind of liquid do we use?
Sanitization liquid.
And if you do not have sanitization liquid to put in, what do you use?
A neutral spirit such as vodka or a cheap hard liquor spirit of your
like
choice.
Scoresby Scotch, my favorite to use in there because I absolutely don't like Scoresby Scotch. So I use that. I don't have any left, actually.
It's all gone?
Yeah, it's totally gone. I'm going to have to buy more just for this purpose. Anyway, so now that our label's made, we have our yeast in, we have everything in, the airlock's on. What are we going to do now?
We're going to let it sit.
This will go for anywhere from an hour to 3 days. There's no way to know. Yeast can't read. And at that time, the yeast is going to build up a colony and you should start seeing airlock activity. If you do not see airlock activity, look for tiny bubbles coming up the side. If you don't see that, after 3 to 4 days, add more yeast. Your yeast are probably dead. And it's okay because they'll just eat the ones that you put in the first time and it'll make them happy. Use a different batch of yeast though. Don't use the exact same one, you know, use something different. Like go to the store and actually buy a new one. Don't use the one that's been in grandma's closet for like 6 years because it's probably no good. By the way, keep your yeast in the fridge, folks. Keep it cold. It'll last a lot longer than that expiration date because again, yeast can't read, but they do like it cold because they go to sleep. Anyway, we'll be back once this gets started. See you soon. 11 days. Time to get a check. Airlock, stop doing stuff.
Mostly.
Mostly. That's not really a true indication that it's done. But it's an indication that it's time to start looking at it and see if maybe it's ready for the next phase. That's all. 1.052. That's not a good sign. What that means is we have a stall, okay? It does happen from time to time. Normally it doesn't happen in low gravities like this, but
because we're dealing with lemon, it's a possibility that's a pH issue.
So, what do you do when this happens? Well, the first thing you want to do is give it a really good shake. Let that go for a couple days. See if it kicks back up again. That's step one. I got to do a shake here. So that means I'm going to take the airlock out of the stopper here. I'm just going to stick my thumb in there. I'm going to shake the bejesus out. There's a lot of gas in here. Oh yeah. Which the gases can actually help stop fermentation as well. Not in a good way, okay? It's not the kind of thing you ever want to do on purpose, but the gases can prevent fermentation.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
And this may be a question that some of our viewers may have as well. Is this process oxygenating the brew?
Yes and no. Okay, somebody's going to ask. Now, because I did not introduce new oxygen, the only oxygen that got in there was I had the lid off for a few seconds. It could introduce a very small amount. But I'm also
seeing tons of gas coming out, so my thought is that it's pushing all that out.
Right. That's the idea. The risk of oxygenation is extraordinarily low. That doesn't mean there's none, but it is extraordinarily low. But I'm not adding oxygen to it. No. Right now, the only thing in here is CO2. There's probably very, very, very little oxygen in here at all. So I just want to get as much of the gas out as I can. Yeah, there's a million ways to degas. I know. I'm doing it the long, boring, old-fashioned way. I'm sorry. But a lot of the time, this is all that's necessary to get it going again. If it really is just a pH issue, well, we may have to deal with that in another way, but that'll be for the next video. So what I'm going to do is degas this for a while, put the airlock back on, put it back on the shelf, and see you in a few days. All right, it's been another week. I did see a little bit of activity in that airlock. Let's see if it did anything. Looks like it might have gone down 2 points. So that means we have to go into recovery mode and see if we can get this to unstick. But first, I want to do a couple things. The first is get a pH reading. We don't do that very often, but it's probably a good idea to find out what our pH is on this guy. That way, if we can figure out if it's just a pH problem, we can combat that. Now, to take a pH reading, there's a lot of tools on the market that can do that. This one came from Amazon. It was relatively cheap. We've had it for years, and I just turned it on to make sure it still works because I don't use it very often. And I'm just going to put a little bit of this into a bowl here. Turn on the pH meter and stick it in. You just want to get it up to the bulb. All right. This is a 2.8 pH, which if 4 is really the low-end pH you want for brewing, there's our explanation as to why this stalled. You might be wondering, how come you didn't check that before? You know why? We've made things like this before and heard of lots of people doing it, and they never had a problem. I usually only check the pH when there might be a problem, which sounds counterintuitive, sort of, but it works for me, and that's the way we've done it. So how can we fix this? Well, there's only a few things that you can really add that are going to change the acidity level. And some of them are from your home brewing store, things like that. We're going to go with a household remedy and give it a try. Baking soda. Okay? It's not really my favorite thing to add to a brew, but in small quantities, it probably won't be detectable in flavor, but it will change the acidity of this and hopefully should bring it up to a fermentable level. Okay. I know baking soda isn't necessarily the first recommended item that you might want to add to your brew, but in this case, we're going to give it a try. I've heard that it works. I'm not 100% sure, so do so at your own risk. I am going to add half a teaspoon to some water here. Well, it's not even half a teaspoon, really. That's about a third of a teaspoon. Add it to some water. I'm going to mix that through. Now, if you're wondering how we came to the amount, looking online, see, the thing is, pH isn't specific. Like if you're at 5 and you want to go to 6, it's a certain amount. But if you're at 4 and you want to go to 5, it's a different amount because it's not exactly a straight scale. So there's some amount of guesswork here, but hey, I'm erring on the side of a little bit of caution first, and we'll give it a try because I don't really want it to taste bad. And it's probably going to carbonate a little bit because, you know, acid and like when you combine baking soda and vinegar and it makes that bubbling thing, same concept.
The Mentos thing.
Yeah. Actually, the Mentos thing is a different reaction.
Oh, it is?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's the nucleation sites?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah. See that? Science, folks. Science. Okay, I'm going to need the Mega Made, please. By the way, in case you were wondering, in between when I had the juice in here, I dumped that out because this wasn't sanitized. Now it's been sanitized, so we can actually use it. But I just want to get a quick little sample here, and we're going to take another pH reading. Took a while last time, so.
Yeah, it kind of works like a digital thermometer where you'll see the numbers and then they'll change quickly at first and then they'll gradually get slower and slower. So you have to be kind of patient.
This time's not really changing much. It has gone up. It was 2.8, now it's 3.2, which that tells me that that quarter teaspoon that I just put in, quarter to a third, I was on the right track by saying half a teaspoon. I think if I put in the same amount again, it'll put us to around 4. That should be perfect. The trick is you don't want to put in too much because then you might taste the baking soda and it tastes kind of weird. But we still want it to be lemony and tart. Yeah, this is not changing. It's sticking around at 3.2. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to take this sample liquid that I have, add in a half a teaspoon again, well, a quarter of a teaspoon. Basically the same amount that I did first time. Whoop. Too much. You don't want too much. Whoa. Reaction right here.
Is that how they did those volcanoes when you were a kid?
Sort of. I never did that.
I never did it either. That's why I was wondering.
I saw it on TV all the time, and I'm like, I always wanted to do that, and I never got to do it. We didn't do that in my school. All right. I just want to give this a little bit of a mix.
I know some people did it for science fairs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Shockingly enough, I grew stuff for science fairs.
We never had science fairs.
Really?
Yeah. I never did that. At least I don't think we did. If we did, maybe I just didn't participate. But it seems like it would have been the kind of thing I would do, making me wonder if we actually just didn't have them.
But you're spilling, babe.
Whoops. I tip it to the side so that it goes fully up to the cathode. See, here's where that logarithmic scale comes into play. I put in like the third of a teaspoon, which I eyeballed it, I'll be honest, and it went up 0.4. Well, I just put in about the same amount and only went up 0.3. So we're at 3.5, which it'll probably be okay, but I think I want to go a little bit more. So same amount, one more time. See if I can do it without spilling it all over the place this time. Interestingly enough, I can go a little bit more because 4 is the minimum. So I might just add a touch more. There we go. I have half of a teaspoon here now, so it might go to like 4.2 or 4.3, which is totally acceptable.
Also, if we end up with our final fermentation product having a little off flavor, in conditioning, we can augment those flavors because we won't have to worry about the pH then.
And if we really hate it, we're just going to dump it out. And that's saying 3.8.
I'm going to say that's close enough.
Yeah, I am afraid
Oh, we went to 3.9.
Oh, we're at 3. Let's give it a minute then. See if it goes to 4. If it goes to 4, we are done. The thing is, honey tends to be 3.5 to 5.5. So I know that a lot of brews have been in that 4 or just under 4 range before, but 2.8 was really low. That was probably too much. 4. Okay. I'm not even going to bother letting it go. It might even be 4.1 or 4.2. Not going to worry about it.
Do you want to put that back in?
I do want to put that back in because I don't want to waste it. But now we have the question of, are the yeast damaged by this? I don't believe so. I believe the yeast are fine. They just went dormant. But just to be sure, let's put some more yeast in because yeast is pretty cheap. We used Premier Côte de Blanc.
I'll go get some more. Brian's going to talk to you, and I'm going to research something while he's doing that.
So, since this is a Red Star product, you know what that means. And I'm only going to use half of it because I'm pretty sure we used a whole packet the last time. I don't think we need this. I think this is just like an extra little buffer. So I'm just going to eyeball half a package. And the rest, I fold up using my patented method. I go halfway across, firm crease, halfway across, firm crease. That way it's very sealed. And then I just do little tiny folds, rolling it down sort of. And then piece of tape on there, put it in the fridge. And it'll last months.
Okay, so what I'm researching is I was trying to find out if there was a particular pH range that this particular yeast enjoys. And unfortunately, I'm not finding that information. I'm finding what temperature range it enjoys, which is 64 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. And I found what alcohol tolerance it is, which is anywhere from 12 to 14%. But I'm not finding its pH.
Yeah, most yeast have a similar pH tolerance range. That's probably why. So it seems like 4 to 8.4 is the highest, was the most you can have. I'm going to put the airlock and bung back on this. Popped right back out again, but it's okay. I am seeing some activity right away. Now, it could very well be just a natural degassing from all the particulate that got put in there. It could be the chemical reaction of the acids and the bases coming together. Yeah.
Something's happening.
Something's going on in there, okay? We're hoping it's fermentation. I'm seeing the tiny bubbles that come from fermentation. And it's getting more violent as we go. This is interesting. Let's give you guys a closer look. Here you're looking at the side. To me, that is what we see when something is fermenting. Do I really think that the yeast perked up that fast? Oh, heck no. I don't believe it. But it's getting more and more active as it goes. That doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. So if someone knows better than me, let me know. But in the meantime, we're going to put this on a shelf and hope that it takes off, and we'll see you in another week. All right, so this has been sitting for about 2 weeks. And as you can see, there's still some activity in that airlock. It could just be off-gassing, I don't know.
But we do see a rim of bubbles. And normally when it has that thin bubble layer, that means that it's still fermenting.
Yeah, so
normally.
We're going to take a test on it and a small sample taste just to see how we're doing. All right, so our reading is 1.012, which means it worked. Adding the baking soda did actually get it to ferment. Let's see, did it change the flavor at all? Did it make it objectionable? Because, you know, there's some concern that it could do that. So I want to make sure. And the rest of this, I am going to just pour back in. We really haven't racked this or anything yet, so I'm just doing it very carefully so as to not oxygenate. I don't believe it's done. I think it's actually still working. As you can see, it's nice and clear. That's called sarcasm. It's exceptionally cloudy still, so I don't think it's done. Smells really young.
Yeah, I can smell it from here.
Well. Doesn't taste bad. A little sweet. I don't think the baking soda hurt the flavor. It's actually really nice. Like that tastes pretty good.
Yeah, the only hint of discordant flavor I'm getting is just from youth.
Yeah. So we're gonna put this away, let it go for another week or two, and we'll be back to let you know how it's doing. All right, so it's been 7 more days. Airlock activity is really, really slow, but it was at 1.012. There wasn't much left, but let's find out, how did it do? It's looking kind of cloudy too, and I might have a solution for that. Also, we're using a baster. Hopefully it won't spill all over the place and make a mess, because that was the whole point, using the baster.
So this baster is the winner from our Who is the Master of Basters contest.
Something.
So if you haven't seen that video, check it out. It's kind of fun. And we tested a lot of basters, basically.
And the reason why we switched is because, see how it's leaking? I don't like that. Okay, so this went to 0.998 actually. It's just a little bit below. Let's just check that, double check it. That is at 0.998. So we in fact did get fermentation to restart up from adding the little bit of baking soda. Let me take a note, not with the green pen. So today is 8/9, and it is 9/98. Okay, now looking at this, it's really cloudy. And well, here's the thing, it's a fruit. There's probably a lot of pectic haze going on here. So we've recently learned the benefits of using pectic enzyme. If you haven't seen that video yet, you should go watch that one too. It was our lingonberry jam cider. And what we found is it took basically Pepto-Bismol looking cider and made it gem-like, okay? So we like that concept. We're going to go with that again. I think for this one, we're gonna definitely do that. I have here some pectic enzyme. It is an optional step. If you don't want to, you don't have to. There's no harm. Cloudiness does not really make it taste any different, especially this kind of cloudiness, but I like it to be clear if possible.
It's an aesthetics issue, really.
Yeah,
that's all.
And pectic enzyme is no big deal. It says when you're doing it after the fact, you want to use double the dose. So it's normally half a teaspoon per US gallon. So about a teaspoon. I don't know that a little too little is going to hurt it, but too much might not be a good thing. So in it goes. Whoops. Hey, wouldn't be City Steading if I didn't make a mess, right? And what I want to do is put the airlock back in there. And I'm just going to give this the swirl method. Like that. And it's probably going to make the airlock go crazy because there was gas in here. It hadn't been degassed. So we're degassing as well as adding some pectic enzyme. Now what the pectic enzyme is going to do is it's going to bind with the pectins in there and it's going to have them all drop out of suspension. We have not racked this yet, so it still has all the lees, everything like that in there. It's totally fine. It'll just help it to clear. Had we thought ahead and were used to using that ingredient already, we could have added it right from the start, and that way it would have stopped it. However, our ethos is kind of like, you don't need it until you need it. Now, certain things you know you're going to need it, like, lingonberry jam. You're probably going to need it. Something like this, I didn't really expect to, so not really a concern. But that is the preferred way, is to use it at fermentation time. Anyway, what are we going to do with this now?
We're going to let it sit.
See you in a week or two when it clears up. All right, it's been 8 days, and now it's time to see, has this dropped anymore? We've also noticed it's a little bit cloudy. We did put it in the fridge and tried to cold crash it for a few days, and well, it's still quite cloudy. Is that a problem? No, you can totally enjoy it this way and it won't affect the flavor. But we do get asked a lot, so we're trying to show new techniques on how to clear it. More on that soon. First, let's get a reading. And for that, I'm going to be using a digital refractometer today. This came to us from Hannah Instruments, by the way, and they have a special coupon just for City Steading viewers of 10% off if you use the code word CITY from the link below on their website. And that's for anything you order. You can get 10% off. But anyway, what we're going to do is use the digital refractometer. Now, when you use a refractometer for an original gravity, totally fine. You can use it, no issues at all. When you use it for a final gravity or an intermediate gravity where there's alcohol present, there's a little bit of a calculation that needs to be done. For that, I'm using the Brewer's Friend calculator. Okay, so that's very, very important. We'll link to that too. But I wanted to use this because, well, A, I just got it. I'm really stoked about it. I think it's really cool. And it doesn't disturb anything to take a reading. I don't have anything to worry about pouring back in. There's a lot of advantages to using a refractometer. The small sample size. Look at that, 1, 2. I'll do 3 just cuz. And I'm gonna drink the rest. Hard to say it. 7.4. Now let me get out the thing here. Now our original gravity was 1.094, and this is 7.4 bricks, which needs to be converted. So 7.4 bricks and update. So that means we had a 0.994. So it actually did go down by 4 more points, though we did the last one with a hydrometer, so I'm not going to really count that. This is actually a 12.77% ABV, by the way. See, this brewer's friend calculator does all that for you. You put in your original gravity, you put in your final bricks gravity, it calculates everything out. It's actually really, really cool. So yeah, our final gravity is 0.994. We're just going to go with that. Let me find a pen that'll work on this here. That's not it.
So I'm sticking up right by the cutter.
There we go. This pen. I like this pen. Today is 8/17.
We have a whole container of pens, but I know there's only like 3 in there that Brian actually likes.
Yep, I'm very picky about my pens.
The rest are for me.
The rest are crap. One of them's green. I don't want to write green. I can't read it from far away.
The green has uses.
If you say so. 12.77%. Okay, so we're going to go with that. I do believe that they used the OG minus FG times 131.25 calculation to get that gravity. It might be the more advanced calculator. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on it. But you know what? It doesn't really matter. It's within a half a point of what I would have done myself. So I'm not worried about it at all. But,
what are we going to do now?
Well, we're not going to let it sit. Not yet. It is a little bit cloudy, but it's also got lees in there.
A good amount of lees. Yeah.
So we're going to rack it. Let's get it off those lees. Now, racking simply means moving from one vessel to another, usually to leave behind fruit solids or lees or things like that. Lees is that sediment that's formed at the bottom. We want to leave that behind. So we're going to put it into a 1 gallon wide mouth container because I see, there's a good amount of space at the top. In here should be less space, which is a good thing once you get to conditioning or secondary phase. And to rack, we're going to use an auto siphon. Can you just use tubing? Sure. There's a few ways you can start it. Most of them are kind of messy and sloppy. Just because everything has been sanitized, you don't want to touch it with your mouth or anything like that to get things started. That just seems bad. Ooh, I took the cap off by mistake. There's lees in there. This cap is not just a protective cover. This is actually there for a reason. It does allow the liquid to flow around it, but it lets you go very deep into the bottle without picking up all the lees. So I'm just going to go about halfway in. And the reason I go halfway in, somebody asked me, is that way I don't disturb the lees when I'm starting up the siphon. By the way, the other end is in the jar. That's very, very, very important. Because if it's not, it just goes everywhere, and that's a bad thing. A few pumps, get it going, and I'm just going to drop this to the bottom. This is the first racking of this. You want to be careful, but it's not crucial. I mean, you can see it's very cloudy, a lot of sediment in the juice still. Okay, it's been racked and it fills that container quite nicely. I'm pretty okay with that. Too much headspace in secondary can cause oxidation. We've never actually had it happen. I know many people who have never had it happen, no matter how much headroom they left, but it's one of those better safe than sorry kind of things. So I try not to do it if possible. How much is too much? As little as possible is really the safest way to go. There's no rule, okay? Okay, then lid, airlock goes back on. We're gonna leave this at room temperature. It does not need to cold crash again. I am just gonna give a little wipe to this so that it's dry for me to put the label back on. Let this go for a few days to a week, see how it does.
And we'll see you then.
And as you can see, it cleared a little bit. It cleared to an acceptable clarity, okay? Sometimes it just isn't gonna work when you do it after the fact. I'm okay with that.
Now we could let this sit for another week and it might clear more. We don't know.
Maybe.
But then we'd have to wait a full another week in order to get this information out to you. So we're not gonna.
Okay, so there. We're gonna do now, we're gonna rack it to a pitcher so we can perform our final tasting or preliminary post-tasting. I don't know. People have come up with all kinds of crazy names. I don't know what to call it.
We're gonna taste it.
Yeah, we're gonna let you know what we think.
Okay, so you've seen us rack a million times, so we'll just see you when we're done.
All right, it's racked. We have about 110 ounces. We're just going to pour a tiny sample and tell you what we think.
I have some predictions. Prediction number 1, we're not going to like this.
No, it's going to taste like ass.
Prediction number 2, it's going to need a lot of sweetening.
Prediction number 3, with a lot of sweetening, I think it's going to taste really, really good.
Yeah, even just smelling it right now, it kind of smells like
Alcoholic lemonade.
Like nail polish remover almost.
Oh, I don't even get that. I don't get that. I mean, think about it. Lemon juice, right? You don't really want to drink lemon juice. But add a ton of sugar to lemon juice and you have lemonade, which is really, really good. This has the added element of ethanol and other alcohols added to it. So you definitely want some sweetness there. Ooh, it's improving. It's still a little harsh. It's very dry, but it's much better than it was last time we tried it.
It has sort of a fruity sweetness to it.
There, you get to finish that.
I don't want to finish that.
Oh, okay, I will.
That I wasn't anticipating, but I still think it needs.
Yeah, the fruitiness came back. It's
more.
not as harsh as it once was. There's hope yet. All right, so what we want to do is add some sugar. We have roughly a gallon here. Now, I'm estimating I probably want something like a 20 point over neutral gravity. So for us, that's about 26 points of gravity. What I mean by that is sugar, regular table sugar, adds 0.046 specific gravity in a gallon of liquid. This is a little bit less than a gallon right now, but once I add a pound of sugar in there, it's probably going to take up that little bit of volume and be about a gallon. So if I want this to go to roughly like the 1.020 gravity from the 0.994 it's at right now, I need about 26 points, which is about half a pound. So we'll start with just under half a pound. Like I'll do 0.4 pounds of sugar and see what it tastes like. It's a big jump, but that's because we know this probably should be relatively sweet. So let's get the scale and the sugar and start measuring. All right, this is just regular white table sugar, half pound.
We're using white table sugar because we want to up the sweetness, but we don't want to augment the flavor so much. We just want to add that sweet note back in. If you want to change the flavor of a brew, you can use any sugar you wish based on the flavors you want to add to your brew.
For those on the metric system, half a pound is about 227 grams. I actually went with 7.7 ounces. It's not quite 0.4 pounds because I had it set to ounces, not pounds. But it's okay, so we'll just go with that.
So what's the metric equivalent of that?
It's actually 0.48 pounds, so it's very close to half pound. 218 grams is what I actually used. 0.48 pounds for those of you keeping track at home. Now, as you can see, there's a little bit of foam on the top here. That's because what's the word? When you put stuff in and it...
I had it, and then you asked me the word, and then it went poof.
Nucleation.
Nucleation sites. That's because sugar is a granular substance, and added into this beverage that has yet to be degassed, it created spots, known as nucleation sites, for that gas to escape.
We want to get all that sugar mixed in. I know, it just went super cloudy on me. It's not because of oxygenation, it's because of the sugar.
It's sugar.
There's a lot of sugar to add to this brew. So I want to make sure I really get it mixed in well. Now, you might be thinking, oh, wow, that is a ton of sugar. And you're not wrong. There are certain beverages, though, that have a lot of sugar in them in order to taste good. Mead is known for being super sweet. A lot of people like it dry, but really, sweet mead is probably more prevalent throughout the world. I might be wrong on that, but I'm thinking most people, when they think of mead, don't think of something dry. They think of something sweet.
But if you think about lemonade, if you've ever made lemonade from scratch, there's a lot of sugar in there.
Yeah, lemonade is not dry. Then it would just be lemon juice. And I already talked about lemon juice and how, you know, I just talked about it. The color has definitely changed. It's more like white than yellow now, but it's starting to clear out a little bit. Smells the same. Tastes pretty darn good though. Just that little bit of sweetness with the tartness of the lemon changed it completely. And keep in mind, this is nearly 13%. This is 12.77%.
I
made from
have
bottled lemonade.
found myself recently drinking a lot of lemonade and vodka.
You've been drinking the lemonade that we used to make this.
Yeah. Because it's easy and it's quick and it tastes good. And so this is kind of lemonade vodka plus.
Yeah, it's got a nice flavor. I actually really like this. I just want to get a reading and know where we're at. I don't think it needs, do you think it needs to be sweeter?
I don't think it needs to be sweeter. I just think it needs to age, and that's just something that's going
Could
to
use a little bit of
come
time.
with
Sure.
time.
So let's get a reading on this. Grab me
Alright.
the reading apparatus. So we did just sweeten this, and we used Red Star Côte de Blanc yeast, which has a 12 to 14% range. The fact that this went totally dry.
And that range is alcohol tolerance.
Yeah. The fact that this went totally dry tells me, though, it may still have some to go. We just added sugar, which is something that yeast like to eat, as we all know. And I need to put the hydrometer in first, otherwise I'm going nowhere. So there's a potential that this could re-ferment, in which case we are going to do a method to stop that fermentation. I will get to that in a little while. Just know it's very important to do it, okay? Don't just like stop the video here and go bottle this and be done, because you're gonna make bombs. I guarantee you're making bombs. So at this point, this is actually lower than I would have thought. It's 1.012 final gravity. Wow. That's interesting because I did almost a half a pound and we got like maybe 20 points out of it, which is close to half a pound. So we're in the ballpark. It's all good. I'm happy with that. I am going to carefully pour this back in. And this is where we normally rack to bottles, but we're going to do something different today. We're going to rack back to a carboy. Okay, it's been racked again. And before anybody loses their mind because of all the headspace we have, I know I put it into a larger container. Well, I put it into this container for a reason. I feel these containers, these fermenters, are a little bit stronger glass. The way they're shaped and everything like that makes them a little bit stronger for what we're about to do next. For our next trick, we're going to pasteurize this brew. Now, in the past, we've put it into bottles and bottle pasteurize. And something interesting happens when you do that. As it heats, it will actually force solids out of suspension and they fall to the bottom and you have more lees in the bottom of your bottles. So we were like, well, how do we get around that? Well, I believe if you use a container that's not super large, like if you're doing 3 or 5 gallons, this might be a lot more difficult to do. I have here a large pot. I have a strong fermenter that when full, see, it's just slightly over the edge of this pot. I think that's important. You don't want too much exposed. You want this to be able to heat properly. I'm going to put water around the outside edge, filling it to about, 3/4 of the way or so, whatever my sous vide or immersion circulator says to do, which I think is about 3/4.
But he needs to not pour it all the way because the immersion circulator is going to displace some of the water,
Right.
raising the level even higher.
Exactly. So I'm going to put it in here like that. Let me go grab the immersion circulator. I'll be right back. All right, the one that we have is by Innova, and it's actually really nice. It's Bluetooth, connects to my phone, and I'm just going to drop it in there. But it does have a marking, minimum and maximum. Maximum is like way up at the top, so we're fine. I just want to attach it to the side here. Make sure it's not touching the bottle. I think that's important. You don't want to have a chance of shattering your glass. And I want to fill this up to as close as I can to that max without, going over the sides, because overflow is not a good thing. And then
so we filled it to roughly
yeah, it's about that far from the rim. So it was almost a gallon of water. And then I don't normally say this is necessary to put some sort of a cap over the top loosely because you're not really losing much alcohol. Okay, a lot of people think you do, and we used to think you do. I learned from a chemist that you don't. But I do know that in cooking, if you have a wide pan and you have a wine or something in there and you cook it for a long time that way, you do lose a considerable amount. So because this will probably take a lot longer than the bottles, I'm putting it on there. This will prevent some evaporation, but it's not like it's gonna solve the whole problem, but it will prevent it from exploding because there's no closed cap. So that's important. Open bottle, large pot of water, sous vide, immersion circulator, the way to go. Please do not be tempted to put this on your stove and heat it up. You're gonna crack that fermenter and lose your entire batch. That is the dangerous, scary thing about this. If it fails, we lost all of it.
Yeah.
If
If you're familiar with canning, when you do a heat bath, whatever it's called, with canning, there is a device that you put in the bottom that separates the cans from the very base of your vessel. That way, the heat dispersion is more gradual and not a direct contact. It's also going to limit vibrations of your cans, so that way they won't shatter.
That's why we like the sous vide, because it heats the water all around it and keeps it moving. There's no direct contact with heat. Now, when it comes to heat, what we want is 140 degrees Fahrenheit, I'll put the Celsius here, internal temperature of this fermenter for 15 minutes. Not the water, the internal temperature of the fermenter, which is probably going to take, I'm going to guess, 20 minutes to 25 minutes past when the water gets to that temperature. So we're not going to show you all of that. We actually have a video on how to do a proper sous vide pasteurization, but this is the gist of it. And at that point, you can remove this from the water. Make sure you put it on a towel or something so this thermal shock doesn't happen. If you put it on something cold, put it on a towel or something like that, or let it sit in there until it cools down. That's totally fine. Then you can rack and bottle, and we'll be back to show you once that's done. Okay, so the pasteurization itself took about an hour. Right now, it's still feeling pretty warm. It's been sitting out for a little bit. I did put it in a little bit of a bath in the sink, not for very long. I don't expect that to be an issue, okay? It only got to 141 degrees Fahrenheit, which isn't really hot enough to do any damage. However, I did notice that no solids really fell out. I think that's a mead thing. Just the honey makes solids fall out. It's all okay. So now we're gonna rack and bottle.
But the important part is that the process, regardless of whether this is a wine, mead, or cider, would be the same if you want to do pasteurization in a full gallon.
Absolutely. And this proves that it works just fine. And if sediment did fall out, now that doesn't have to get into your bottles. That's the beauty part of this. As always, we're going to use a bottling wand on the end of the auto siphon, and it's just a piece of plastic tubing, some of them are metal, that has a little valve at the end, and I flipped water onto my glasses. I hate that.
So we're already racked, so I've taken the little cap off the end of our auto siphon.
There's really nothing
because there's nothing in the bottom yet.
And we're just going to get that started. Notice the one-hand technique. And that's it. Now we bottle. See you in a few. All right, so after bottling, we have 4 bottles and a taster. And that's okay. This came out to 12.77%. These bottles are going to go away. One of them is going to go away for a year. One of them is going to go away for 2 years, most likely. And then the other 2, well, we'll probably just consume them. The idea of sediment dropping out, though, it doesn't look like any really did from the pasteurization this time, but we'll have to try again next time with honey and mead, see what happens then. But now, on to the tasting. Okay.
So obviously our partial bottle is going to be our taster bottle because that needs to be consumed first.
Yeah, and we don't really need to drink a whole bottle for a tasting. Just a partial is good. So let me make those pours here. And we'll go back for a second. So we pasteurize this, and a lot of people ask, do we pasteurize everything? No, actually we don't. We pasteurize rarely, if in all honesty.
This one got pasteurized because we dumped a crap ton of sugar in it.
Yeah, if there's a chance that it could re-ferment, you want to be safe and you want to pasteurize. That's the whole reason behind it. I'm just trying to get these equal. I know this is like really intriguing TV right now. All right. There's a label I don't have to make.
You just want that bottle to go away.
Yep, that way I don't have to make it.
So clarity, it's actually still pretty clear. It's a little cloudy. We're not
it's like a 6,
surprised by that, but it's not offensive at all. I think it looks like a lemonade.
It looks like lemonade. Yeah, I was just going to say exactly that. On the smell, it smells like lemonade. It smells like kind of like a hard lemonade, like an alcoholic lemonade.
I'm still getting what I am attributing to nail polish remover scent. I know Brian isn't getting that scent. Maybe I'm just...
No.
And we talked about this off camera, and I think part of the reason is my upbringing. I was born in Florida, and then I moved to California, and then I moved back to Florida. So I spent the majority of my youth and my developmental years in 2 states that are well known for producing citrus. And in the cul-de-sac that I lived in California, there was a family that actually worked in a citrus farm, and so they always had fresh oranges on hand. So I would walk the cul-de-sac and go hang out with them and eat oranges because, you know, what else does a toddler do? But I think because of my bringing up, my raising, my developmental years in those two areas, I have a strong aversion towards the smell of fermented citrus.
Yeah, like a rotting fruit thing.
Because my brain says that's bad, don't eat that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of ruined me for any citrus
that makes sense.
fermentation. Now, I noticed that when we add just a touch of citrus peel to a beverage, that doesn't bother me because my brain isn't going,
Sure.
that's fermented citrus. It's when it's primarily citrus that's being fermented, such as in this case.
Oh, I totally get that.
My brain is like, nope, nope.
You know what this tastes like to me? Limoncello.
Now, I do like me some limoncello.
That is exactly what this tastes like to me. Not as harsh, not as strong. Not harsh, not as strong, but it has the same flavors as limoncello, which is really interesting because a few years ago you couldn't get me anywhere near limoncello. Now I kind of like it.
This brew, as we've mentioned multiple times in our tastings, if you change the temperature of a brew, it's going to change the flavor of the brew.
Yeah, this is a little above room temperature.
Because there are certain proteins and different compounds that your brain interprets as flavor that can be enhanced or even shut off to an extent based on temperature changes. So I think this actually could be really nice cold.
Cold.
Thank you.
Should be cold.
Thank you for making that concise because I was
Should
babbling.
be cold. Make it cold. Yeah, this is slightly above room temperature. I'd say it's like blood temperature right now, maybe even a couple degrees warmer. And it's not unpleasant.
No.
But you definitely taste everything, which is probably a great way to do a tasting because all the good, all the bad is coming through. So let me take you on a little trip after I get one more sip. As soon as it hits your tongue, I get lemonade. I taste lemonade. Sugar and lemon, and it's very, very nice. I really like it. As it gets to the mid-mouth section, as it's traveling through, that's when some of the tartness starts to really set in. There's even a decent tannic quality to this that I'm not sure where it's coming from, but there is a decent tannic quality to it that gives a viscous mouthfeel. This feels a lot richer and thicker than you would think it should. I think it's the sweetness. When you add sugar to something, it can do that. It's not like sugar water, but it definitely has that. It's not overly sweet. That's one thing I want to say. This is not like a sweet beverage. It's not like drinking lemonade.
It's definitely sweet rather than dry, but it's not like punch in the face sweet.
You know, just like cloying. It's not like that at all. The lemon flavor is actually quite nice. And then on the finish, it's a little bit crisper and cleaner than some. Finishes pretty well. I think it's actually nice.
Now that I'm thinking about it more, and the residual sensation on my tongue is reminding me of like a key lime pie, something with a meringue. I feel like I'm getting some of the essence
now I want key lime pie.
Meringue in there, and I'm not sure how that works out.
Essence of meringue. She doesn't like meringue.
I don't like meringue, but
so that's not a good thing. That's why we don't get key lime pie or lemon meringue pie around here much, because she doesn't like meringue. I actually like this.
I think aged and cold, this is going to be significantly better, at least for my palate.
I don't even think it needs age. I think it tastes really good as it is. I think it just needs to be cold. Now, if we had a lot more time, we would totally do that and show you guys. But we like everything to be consistent and concise. So that's why we're not going to make this a 14-hour video. So it'll probably be like one.
So that means it's time for numbers.
Yes. Now, our scoring system is thus. It goes from 1 through 10. 1 being complete crap, something that you'd probably throw away. I did say in another video we probably wouldn't show you, but you know what? We probably would, because we're not infallible, and it's probably a good idea for you guys to see what a bad brew looks like so that you can recognize it yourself, and you can probably prevent it. In other words, learn from our mistakes. Then there's 10. 10 would be the opposite end. It would be the wah moment, when you look at a whole bunch of brews and go, that one. Except, of course, the few that we've given an 11 to, in which case the 10 would get put to the side and the 11s would get chosen first. But that's the exception. We're not going there. A 5 to me is not just middling. It's not like in the middle. It is almost a cutoff for me. where 5 is, I would reach for that. I would willingly drink that. Below a 5, I might consider whether I really want to have a drink that day. If that makes sense. So between 1 and 4.5 is varying levels of ick. Between 5 and 10, or possibly 11, is varying levels of, oh wow, this is good. Does that clear it up for you?
Sure.
Hey, it's kind of like whose line is it anyway? The points don't matter and the scores are all just made up.
1, 2.
I need more sip first. So I'm trying to put this into perspective. It's such a different thing. All right, I think I have a score. You ready?
Uh-huh.
1, 2, 3,
4.5.
And here we have the different tastes of Brian and Derica. This happened in the opposite way on something else just recently. But what's interesting about this more is I am not a fan of lemon. Or not, I'm becoming more, but
sure,
for years
yeah.
I wouldn't go near it.
Yeah.
I liked lemonade, but I wouldn't touch anything with lemon juice. I didn't like lemon.
Like cooking, for example. I'd be like, oh, maybe I should put some lemon or lime in there. And he's like, oh, no. I'm like, what do you mean? No,
and now I make ice water with lemon to just drink with my water. So, yeah, lots has changed. I like this. I like this a lot. I totally see pouring this into a mug and sitting there drinking it. I got no issue with that. This is good. Why are you?
I, however, have some issues with this one, and I think I need it cold and I need it aged. I feel like for me, there's some residual youth in there that's really causing me some issues, and I really, really, really like lemonade.
Yeah, more than me actually.
Like, I will drink lemonade with a splash of vodka. I will drink lemonade with a splash of Everclear.
We bought
that's how crazy
like 4 times as much lemonade as we needed to make this because it came from Costco.
So I've been consuming that.
So she's been drinking
all on my own. This, however, has a funk to it that's just
I think
triggering.
I think it's your youth coming
Youth Derica. Youth Derica's like, no,
this is rotten
bad.
fruit.
Bad.
Okay, but you know what you got to do? You have to pour some Cointreau in that.
Okay, now see.
That could change everything.
Immediately, I went to my happy place. I want to just put some ice in there, but Cointreau might do it.
Do the Cointreau.
All right,
Cointreau.
Seriously, people at Cointreau, you need to sponsor me. Just
yes,
me,
seriously.
Not the channel, just me. I will be your spokesperson.
What's the difference?
There's no difference. I'm just being silly.
She's owned by City Steading Entertainment Group, just like I am.
If something's bad, simply add Cointreau. Right.
I would imagine that probably does improve it.
I tried to be not so
heavy-handed.
Heavy-handed. Did I succeed?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Here, let me do this for you.
I'm not doing that.
She was doing all right. It's just very full. When they're full like that, it's harder to do. Got to get a good vortex going.
Well, see, your fingers are blocking, so they can't see how fancy you are with your vortex.
There you go.
All right.
You're vortexed.
Okay, on the aroma, immediately, I'm not smelling, ooh, scary nail polish. Oh, wow. No, I'm smelling orange and lemon. And what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. Thank you very much.
Oh, wow. You know what that tastes like? Sprite. It tastes like Sprite. Doesn't it?
It tastes like warm, explicitive of your choice, Sprite.
Yeah.
That is nuts.
Yep. So on ice, you're drinking Sprite. You will get schnockered drinking this. Oh my God.
Oh my goodness. This is a danger.
So did this just go from a 4.5 to a
9.5?
So
if it's crappy, just add some Cointreau.
We've proven again that Derica is a Cointreau fan, which is funny because I'm the one that bought the Cointreau, and she's like, "What do you want that for?"
I never had Cointreau, and now it's my fave.
It's pretty awesome stuff. But anyway, guys, that's our version of Skeeter Pee, and as always, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.